Imagine looking down into the crib at your newborn identical twins, right? And you see the exact, impossible scars of your dead children just staring back at you.
Yeah, that is a terrifying thought.
It really is. Today's deep dive is into the Pollock twins. It's this legendary case that honestly completely fractures our understanding of life, death, and the terrifying power of human memory.
It really pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible.
Absolutely. But before we get into it, a really serious warning to you, the listener. To actually unpack this mystery today, we have to talk about the tragic deaths of children, severe grief, suicide, and some, frankly, deeply disturbing allegations of abuse later on.
Right, it gets very dark.
Yeah, so if you need to skip this one, we completely understand. But if you're staying with us, well, let's dive in.
I mean, it really is one of the most chilling mysteries of the 20th century. And, as someone who has spent way too much time falling down true crime rabbit holes and exploring the weirder edges of psychology, this case just has everything.
Oh, for sure.
You have two toddlers displaying inexplicable, unlearned behaviors. Right. They possess these hyper-specific memories of a life they never lived, and they bear the physical scars of a trauma they never actually experienced.
Right, but let's set the baseline here early on, because I look at this through the lens of logic and forensic reality.
Of course you do.
Well, I have to. We're talking about a case that largely hinges on the testimony of a highly biased, grieving father, a guy who was, frankly, openly obsessed with the concept of reincarnation from the jump.
That's a fair point.
And conveniently, we have a total lack of medical records from the actual birth. So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out what actually happened here. Were these girls the literal reincarnations of their deceased older sisters?
Or, are we looking at the product of a profoundly, perhaps dangerously traumatized family system?
Exactly.
It's basically the ultimate locked room mystery, but the locked room is the human mind itself. And as we go through this, I really want you, the listener, to put yourself in the ultimate jury box.
Yeah. Ask yourself what you would believe.
Right. Ask yourself what you would let yourself believe if your family's absolute worst tragedy suddenly seemed to, reverse itself overnight.
Which is a heavy question.
It is. But to even understand why the parents, John and Florence Pollock, believed what they did, we have to go back. We have to look at the horrifying trauma that shattered their family before the twins were even a thought.
Right. Okay, so we're in Hexham, England, May 7th, 1957. 11-year-old Joanna Pollock and her 6-year-old sister Jacqueline are walking to church.
Just a normal Sunday.
Exactly. They're with a 9-year-old friend named Anthony Layden, just 3 kids walking down the pavement.
And that normality is what makes it so devastating, I think. Because at that exact same time, a local woman named Marjorie Wynn was driving her car.
Yeah, and she should not have been behind the wheel.
No, absolutely not. Wynn was severely depressed and actively suicidal at the time. But more importantly, she was driving under the heavy influence of aspirin and phenobarbital.
Which is a powerful barbiturate,
Right.
Used to treat epilepsy.
Exactly. She was completely incapacitated. So she lost control of her vehicle, mounted the pavement, and struck all 3 children.
God, it's just awful.
It's horrific. They were trapped against a brick wall, thrown into the air, and they died instantly.
And what happens next in the justice system is a massive, massive catalyst for this entire mystery. Marjorie Wynn killed 3 children while driving severely intoxicated. Her sentence: 3 years of probation and a 7-year driving ban.
Just probation.
That's it. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Let's think about the logic of that. If you look at modern vehicular manslaughter cases, a sentence of probation for driving intoxicated onto a sidewalk and killing 3 kids it's a shocking judicial failure.
The grief in that community must have been suffocating. You have to imagine a town where 300 children marched down the streets in total silence at the funeral.
Which is so heavy.
The outrage was just palpable.
And completely justified. There is zero closure there. As a parent, how do you even begin to process that level of injustice?
You don't.
No, you really don't. That kind of massive injustice fundamentally breaks a person's psychology. And it absolutely broke John Pollock.
It really did. John was a devout Catholic. But after the accident, that lack of justice kind of pushed him into this paradoxical, almost desperate belief system.
Right. He started obsessively praying for proof of reincarnation.
Yeah, and he actually felt immense guilt about it, too. He thought that the accident was God punishing him for having these heretical, non-Catholic thoughts in the first place.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy of guilt?
Exactly. But instead of letting it go, he just completely doubled down.
He didn't just double down, he literally made a prophecy, like
Yeah.
a highly specific, medically improbable prophecy.
He really did.
He told his wife, Florence, that she was going to get pregnant again and that she would give birth to twin girls who were the literal reincarnations of Joanna and Jacqueline.
Which is an immense amount of pressure to put on a grieving wife.
Oh, absolutely.
And Florence, who was also just drowning in grief, eventually did get pregnant, but her doctor explicitly told them to expect one child.
Just one.
Yes. He only detected a single fetal heartbeat.
Oh.
And there was absolutely no history of twins on either side of their families. None.
Which makes what happened next genuinely baffling from a biological standpoint. Because on October 4th, 1958, less than a year and a half after the accident, Florence gave birth to monozygotic, meaning identical, twin girls.
Billy and Jennifer.
Right. But it wasn't just the fact that they were twins that convinced John his crazy prophecy had come true. It was the physical marks on their bodies.
Okay, this is where the physical evidence gets incredibly eerie. So let's look at Jacqueline, the younger sister who died at age 6. She had a very distinct dark birthmark on her left waist.
Okay.
She also had this indented scar above her right eye. When she was 3 years old, she'd fallen face first into a bucket, and it left a permanent scar that would actually darken in cold weather.
Like a specific trauma scar.
Exactly. Fast forward to the birth of the twins. Jennifer, one of the newborn girls, is born with a birthmark on her left waist that perfectly matches Jacqueline's. And even more chillingly, she has a mark on her forehead in the exact spot where Jacqueline had her bucket scar.
Wait, hold on. I have to jump in here because I'm genuinely confused by the biology of this. If we're talking about identical twins, monozygotic twins, they come from the exact same fertilized egg that splits in two, right?
Right.
They share the exact same DNA. So how is it biologically possible for one twin to have a massive birthmark and a strange forehead blemish, and the other twin to have completely clear skin?
It's a great question, and it really pushes the boundaries of genetics. While identical twins share the same DNA sequence, they don't always share the exact same physical traits due to epigenetics.
Okay, epigenetics.
Yeah, think of epigenetics as a series of chemical switches that turn certain genes on or off based on the in utero environment or blood supply or even just sheer random mutation during cell division.
So it is medically possible for one identical twin to have a birthmark the other doesn't.
Yes, it is. But what parapsychologists argue is the sheer statistical absurdity of those random genetic mutations perfectly mimicking a deceased sister's completely unrelated physical scar and birthmark.
Okay, I mean, the epigenetic switch makes sense for a normal birthmark, but a mark mimicking an acquired trauma scar, that is wild.
It really is.
But as the resident skeptic here, I have to point out the glaring neon-lit issue with this evidence.
I know what you're going to say.
There is a total lack of hospital documentation or independent medical photos from the actual day of their birth. We only have John and Florence's word that these marks were pristine matches before the story became a global sensation.
Well, yes.
So we have to ask, are we looking at supernatural biology, or are we looking at a desperate father seeing exactly what he wants to see in a pair of very normal, coincidental baby blemishes?
It's so easy to be skeptical when we don't have the 1958 medical charts right in front of us.
Yeah.
But we have to look at how this fits into broader parapsychological research. Have you looked into Dr. Ian Stevenson's work?
The psychiatrist from the University of Virginia, right?
Yes. Dr. Stevenson spent 40 years rigorously studying these exact phenomena. He investigated over 2,000 cases of children claiming past lives.
Wow, 2,000!
Yeah, and his data showed that roughly 35% of those children have birthmarks or birth defects that directly correspond to the wounds or specific marks of the deceased person they remember. He actually traveled to England and investigated the Pollock twins himself.
I hear that, but a physical mark is highly subjective, you know? What is undeniable, though, is the behavior.
The behavior is the craziest part.
Because while we can debate the shape of a birthmark all day, the way these twins started acting as they grew into toddlers is what truly captured the world's attention. It just defies any simple, logical explanation.
Exactly. So when the twins were infants, the family actually moved away from Hexham to a coastal town called Whitley Bay.
Getting away from the memories.
Trying to, yeah. Florence had taken all of Joanna and Jacqueline's old toys, boxed them up, and hid them away in the attic. The twins had never seen them, never played with them. But when the twins were between 2 and 4 years old, Florence finally brought the boxes down.
And the twins' reaction was instantaneous.
Totally unprompted.
Gillian immediately went for Joanna's teddy bear, claimed it, and correctly called it Teddy. Jennifer took Jacqueline's toy rabbit, claimed it, and called it Tommy.
And they both casually mentioned that the toys had come from Santa Claus, which, according to Florence, was entirely true for the original sisters.
That is just spooky.
And it went way beyond object recognition, too. They exhibited deeply ingrained idiosyncratic physical habits.
Like what?
Well, the older deceased sister, Joanna, had walked with a very distinct splay-footed gait. She also famously once told her parents, "I will never be a lady."
Okay.
Gillian, the older twin, developed that exact same splay-footed walk. And the deceased younger sister, Jacqueline, used to hold her pencil upright in a fist rather than pinching it between her fingers.
Let me guess.
Yep. Jennifer, the younger twin, held her pencil in that exact same fist grip.
See, but the thing that really stops me in my tracks isn't a pencil grip, it's the trauma response.
The cars.
Yes. Florence started noticing that these toddlers had an intense, paralyzing phobia of cars. There is this deeply unsettling incident detailed in the sources where a car suddenly started its engine in an enclosed alleyway near the family.
Like completely panicked.
The girls didn't just jump, they shrank against a brick wall in absolute terror, hyperventilating and screaming, "The car! The car! It's coming for us!"
What's fascinating and honestly just heartbreaking here is that they are exhibiting severe PTSD symptoms for a fatal crash they never biologically experienced.
Right.
And it manifested in their play, too.
Yeah.
Florence walked into their bedroom one afternoon and found them playing a horrifying game.
Ugh. I remember reading this part.
Jillian was sitting on the floor, cradling Jennifer's head in her lap. She was gently stroking her sister's forehead and saying, "The blood's coming out of your eyes. That's where the car hit you."
Which is a detail that no toddler should know. And John Pollock later confirmed that when he had to go to the morgue to identify his daughter's bodies, Jacqueline's head had been heavily bandaged specifically above the eyes because of the trauma from the impact.
So how does a 3-year-old know the specific location of a fatal injury from a closed casket funeral that happened before she was even conceived?
Okay, well, let's look at the psychology of that, because this brings me to a concept called cryptomnesia.
Cryptomnesia.
Right. It's a memory bias whereby a person unconsciously recalls information, but they completely forget the source of that information. They believe they are having a new, original thought or retrieving a genuine memory.
How does that actually work in the brain, practically speaking?
Think of it like saving a file on your computer, but the metadata gets corrupted.
Okay.
The file, like the information itself, is fully intact and accessible, but the created by or downloaded from tags are completely erased. Your brain has the data, but no idea how it got there. Now apply that to the Pollock house. John was completely obsessed with the idea that his dead daughters were back. He's constantly talking about it. Florence is constantly reacting to it. Is it really a stretch to think that a deeply traumatized household was subconsciously dropping verbal breadcrumbs?
You mean the kids just overheard it?
Yes. The toddlers absorb these details, overhearing adult conversations. The metadata of "dad said this" gets corrupted in their little toddler brains, and they just parrot the information back.
I mean, cryptomnesia explains the toys. It explains the morbid game. If John was muttering about the morgue, they could absolutely absorb that. But cryptomnesia completely fails to explain the geographical knowledge.
You mean the Hexham visit?
Right. When the twins were 4 years old, the family made a rare trip back to Hexham. Remember, the twins had moved to Whitley Bay when they were tiny infants.
Yeah, they had no business knowing that town.
Exactly. They had absolutely no conscious memory of this town. Yet, as they were walking down the street, the twins started spontaneously pointing out landmarks. They knew exactly where the school was. They knew the intricate path to the local park and the swings, running ahead with perfect navigation to the exact places that Joanna and Jacqueline used to play. You can't absorb a map of a town through atmospheric grief.
It's a fair point, and it's behaviors like that which elevated this from just a local oddity to a case of major academic study. It forced experts to sit down and generate theories to explain what the hell was happening.
And the sources give us 3 main frameworks to look at here: maternal impression, super psi, and family systems theory.
Right, so let's start with Dr. Ian Stevenson's baseline. He noted that the twins followed the exact timeline he observed in hundreds of other suspected reincarnation cases.
Yeah, the timeline is very specific.
The memories began manifesting around age 2 or 3, peaked around 4, and then completely faded away by the time the girls turned 5 to 7. By the time Gillian and Jennifer were teenagers, they remembered absolutely none of it. It was like a fever that just broke.
Which naturally leads people to try and find a biological explanation. Some early researchers floated the maternal impression theory.
What's that?
This is an antiquated idea that a pregnant mother's intense psychological states, her profound grief, her obsessions, can literally physically shape the fetus in utero. The idea being that Florence's all-consuming grief over Jacqueline's bucket scar physically imprinted that same scar onto Jennifer's forming tissue.
Which modern biology entirely rejects. I mean, come on, you can't grieve a birthmark into existence.
Exactly. That's where parapsychologists bring in the super psi theory. And this is where things get genuinely mind-bending. Super psi is the concept of living agent telepathy.
Okay, unpack that for me, because living agent telepathy sounds like an X-Men comic.
I know, but stick with me. Instead of looking at reincarnation as a literal soul migrating from a dead body into a new fetus, super psi suggests something different.
Really?
It posits that human consciousness isn't entirely confined to the physical brain. Imagine human consciousness as an interconnected network, or like a quantum field of information. Parapsychologists argue that these toddlers weren't inhabited by the souls of the dead girls. Rather, their brains acted like hypersensitive receivers. Because of their genetic link and the intense emotional environment, they subconsciously downloaded the memories, fears, and data of the dead girls' lives directly from this collective field, or even telepathically from their parents' own minds.
So wait, they are basically hacking into their dad's memories of the morgue using supernatural Wi-Fi.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's an information transfer, not a soul transfer.
I mean, it's a fascinating concept, but to me, it vastly overcomplicates something that psychology already has an answer for.
You think so?
Yes. If we want to understand the Pollock twins, I strongly believe we just need to look at family systems theory, specifically the concept of inherited grief and the epigenetics of trauma.
You're talking about how a child's nervous system tunes itself to the parents.
Exactly. You have a father who is an overbearing, dominant figure, drowning in an ocean of unresolved trauma. He creates a household environment completely saturated in grief and expectation.
Right.
A child doesn't need to be psychic to know their parents are terrified. The nervous system of a toddler is practically porous. The girls were terrified of cars, not because they remembered dying in one, but because their mother likely tensed up, gasped, and gripped their hands in a vice every single time they approached a crosswalk.
I completely agree that children absorb parental anxiety. But family systems theory struggles to explain the sheer specificity of the knowledge.
Does it, though?
Yes. A mother's tension at a crosswalk explains a fear of cars. It does not explain a child pointing to a birthmark and saying, "That's where you hit it on a bucket." It doesn't explain knowing a toy rabbit is named Tommy.
Well, that assumes the father wasn't explicitly feeding them those details to validate his own prophecy.
Which is a huge accusation.
But it's the logical theory, the idea of a manipulative, overbearing father coercing his children that gets a massive, incredibly dark corroboration decades later. In 2024, everything the public thought they knew about this miraculous case was forced into a severe reevaluation.
Yes. The release of the 2024 Extrasensory podcast completely detonated the accepted narrative.
It really did.
The producers tracked down John Pollock's granddaughters, Liza and Joanna. And yes, Joanna was named after the deceased sister. And their interviews were just explosive. They claimed that the entire reincarnation story was nothing but a deeply guarded family secret hoax.
And they absolutely did not hold back in their assessment of John Pollock.
Not at all.
They described their grandfather as a narcissistic, gaslighting little man. They alleged that he was physically abusive to Florence, effectively terrorizing her into playing along with this grand delusion because he craved the media attention and the validation of his weird spiritual beliefs.
The granddaughters claimed that John literally rehearsed lines with the twins.
Like a script.
Yeah, they said he would drill them on what to say and how to act before Dr. Stevenson or journalists would arrive at the house. And the allegations go to an incredibly dark place from there.
Yeah, they do.
One of the granddaughters, Liza, claimed that when she was just a little girl, around 4 years old, John would bring her into his private study.
Ugh.
She alleges that he would isolate her, show her gruesome, terrifying books on autopsies and photos of murder victims, and that he sexually molested her in that room.
It just paints a horrifying picture. We're no longer looking at a grieving father seeking peace. We're looking at a deeply disturbed, controlling patriarch who ruled his family through fear, isolation, and manipulation. It turns the entire reincarnation miracle into a true crime tragedy about child abuse.
But the story doesn't end cleanly there, unfortunately, because you have a massive rebuttal from the inside.
From the twins.
From Jennifer, yes, the surviving twin. She broke a 40-year silence specifically to defend her father against her niece's claims. She went on the record stating that while her father was deeply flawed, she openly admitted he had affairs and wasn't a perfect husband. He was a loving spiritualist.
Right.
She insists vehemently that he never lied to them and he absolutely never coached them or rehearsed lines with them.
She even claimed she wasn't fully told the details about her dead sisters until she was in her teens.
Right. And to this day, Jennifer remains about 80% convinced that she actually is the reincarnation of Jacqueline. And this clash of realities is what makes the psychology of this case so profound.
It's totally, completely fractured.
Exactly. How does trauma fracture a family so completely that two generations have entirely opposing realities about their own foundational history? You have granddaughters claiming it was a horrific, orchestrated, abusive hoax, and the actual subject of the phenomenon saying it was a genuine, loving, spiritual miracle.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If you look at the Pollock household through the lens of those 2024 allegations, it functions almost exactly like an isolated cult built entirely on grief.
A cult of personality around the dad.
Think about it. John is the charismatic, dogmatic leader who holds the truth. The family members are the isolated, compliant followers, and this is where I want you, the listener, to really think about your own mind.
Memory is a tricky thing.
It is. Think about a memory you have from when you were 3 years old. Are you absolutely sure you actually remember the event? Or have you just heard your parents tell that story so many times or seen the photographs so often that your brain generated a false video file of it?
The plasticity of memory.
Exactly. Is the true mystery of the Pollock twins not about ghosts or migrating souls, but about the terrifying plasticity of the human mind? When a child's reality is subjected to the sheer gravitational pull of a parent's absolute grief and coercive control, that reality can be molded into whatever shape the parent needs it to take to survive their trauma.
Wow.
If dad needs me to be Jacqueline so he doesn't fall apart, my brain will make me Jacqueline.
It's a deeply unsettling thought that the real haunting wasn't supernatural, but psychological. But we have to acknowledge that even with these dark, highly credible revelations of abuse and coaching, the Pollock twins case remains officially unsolved.
It's true.
It is this incredible, frustrating clash. On one hand, you have chilling physical evidence.
Yeah.
The matching birthmarks that defy simple genetics, the unlearned childhood behaviors, the geographic navigation of Hexam.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have a deeply flawed, traumatized family dynamic fraught with credible allegations of severe manipulation and abuse.
Which perfectly highlights the value of looking at these phenomena through multiple lenses. You have the parapsychology lens looking strictly at the data points, the toys, the scars, the navigation.
Yeah.
And then you have the psychological lens looking at the deeply flawed, hurting human beings who are generating those data points. You can't understand the phenomenon without understanding the trauma that birthed it.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the Pollock family, I want to leave you with one final unexplained nugget from the source material to mull over.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
We talked earlier about how Dr. Stevenson noted that the twins' memories faded completely by the time they turned 5. Normal developmental amnesia took over, they went to school, and they forgot all about Joanna and Jacqueline.
Right, which fits perfectly with the idea that once they were out of the father's constant isolated control and out in the real world, the coaching wore off.
It does fit perfectly, except for what happened in 1981.
Oh, right, the Wickham house.
Yes. In 1981, Gillian was in her 20s. She was an adult living her own life, entirely separated from the childhood reincarnation narrative. She had completely forgotten her so-called past life.
Okay.
But one day, she suddenly experienced an incredibly accurate, completely spontaneous vision. She vividly saw herself playing in a specific sandpit at a specific house with her brothers. She was able to describe the house, the surrounding gardens, and the orchards with perfect crystalline detail.
And researchers verified the location. It was a house in Wickham.
Exactly. It was a house that the deceased sister, Joanna, had lived in and played at before she was 4 years old. But here is the detail that breaks the coaching theory. Gillian, the adult twin having the vision, had never visited that house in her entire life.
Never.
Never. Nor had it been a major topic of family discussion that a father would coach a toddler on.
See, we try so hard to sweep up the shards of this tragedy with logic. We use psychology, theories of cryptomnesia, epigenetics, and allegations of coercive control to make it make sense. We try to tell ourselves that the timeline is linear, that death is final, and that memory is just a biological hard drive.
But then, decades later, a 20-something woman perfectly describes the layout of a garden she never walked in.
And you have to wonder, do we actually understand how the human mind works, or are we just refusing to look at what's really there? Something
Yeah.
for you to think about.